I think that it's a little worrying if you've boxed yourself into a world where literally every single candidate, except for the one candidate that you want, will lead you to fascism. But you can't just run with the assumption that every single thing you have to say is in the interest of everyone else, and when they disagree, they're against their own interests. Those attacks are not only more noticeable because they're more visible, but also that they're incredibly vitriolic. You have to build a coalition of not only voters, but of people in and out of the establishment if you want to actually make meaningful change. It's something that we're now learning very hard. Trump had probably the greatest asset that he could have ever had to his campaign. I mean, before Super Tuesday, I would have disagreed, but like looking at the turnout for Biden, it's actually been insane.
So it sounds like what we're talking about here is what sort of rhetoric should we be engaging in for the best political outcomes, given the fact that it looks like Bernie Sanders is probably not going to win the primary, right? That I think ultimately that's the kind of conversation that we're having here. And like I don't know, Pxie, like it seems like maybe you're getting mischaracterized here in this conversation. I don't know if you want to like reiterate your stances, but I think this conversation started, or I think when we were starting to push back on you, it started because I think we were having a conversation about Bernie or busters, and then you kind of said like, well, you know, like I kind of like understand some of the sentiment, and then you kind of like laid out like an argument for that, right?
Well, I feel like I never laid out an argument for Bernie or bust, because I specifically like said multiple times like voting fucking Trump 4 more years is literally a direct path to fascism. The argument I was trying to make is that a return to normalcy like might also fucking lay a path to potential fascism. So the question is like, how are we going to fight against that? Is there a way to fight against that? And like how, like basically like what path do we take forward, right? I mean, that's what my biggest concerns are about the whole like Biden return to like normalcy rhetoric. Because I think like if we somehow do elect Biden, and we have like a return to normalcy, I honestly think it's going to end up with a lot of people still upset at their current economic situation, who are clinging for some sort of answer, who are going to look up to an authoritarian leader like Trump, who gives them answers like, oh, it's the dirty immigrants or whatever. So that way they have an easy villain to like throw their sticks at and like blame their current economic situation at. So like that's my whole like argument about like, oh yeah, Biden, like return to normalcy, like this is the way to go down the future. I definitely don't think the way to go down to the future is like to have Trump another fucking 4 years. Absolutely not. But I really am not okay with the rhetoric of like, oh, Biden 4 more years and we're good. Like things are gonna actually.
I think that there's this underlying assumption. This is something that I've been like fighting a lot over the past few months. There's this underlying assumption. There's two really problematic things with this. I think one is people have this roadmap where if it's anybody but Bernie, it's fascism. So like if it's a progressive candidate who's not progressive enough, like if it's Pete or Warren, that's going to lead to fascism. If it's an establishment Democrat, then people will become complacent and then get upset, and that's fascism. And if it's Trump, he's fascist, so that's fascism. But like everybody, I think that it's a little worrying if you've boxed yourself into a world where literally every single candidate, except for the one candidate that you want, will lead you to fascism. Because like, especially because a lot of these stories we're kind of reaching. Like if an establishment Democrat comes in and they don't properly address the issues that the working class has, then people will look for an authoritarian leader. Like you need like 5 if statements to actually get to fascism from there. And we can just as easily say
who actually thinks that Pete Buttigieg is leading to fucking like fascism?
Well, a lot of people. I've heard that a lot, especially rat fuck Pete. I've heard that claim a lot, that like voting for any non-Bernie Democrat is going to lead you to a road to fascism. I've heard it from pretty big people on the left too. It's not just random Twitter threads.
Really?
Like
who?
Well, like, for instance, like that Chapo tweet, the one that they defended about Pete, the whole point of that tweet wasn't even that it was a group of gay guys raping somebody or torturing somebody. It was the fact that it was a fascist, right? I've heard Hassan himself say multiple times that, like a vote for any establishment Democrat is taking us down the road for fascism. And then Pxie laid out the pretty standard argument that I've heard time and time again, that like anybody that we vote for besides Trump is going to lead us to fascism because we go back to normal. I think the reality is, and this is something that I've said for a while, and I think we're finally like converging on this reality, is I don't think there's this huge swell of progressive ideology in the United States. Like a lot of progressives kind of want there to be. The underlying assumption, and I get this a lot when I talk to progressives, is this idea that like really everybody in America wants progressive policy. They just don't know it yet because they're not informed enough. I don't think that's necessarily true. And I think that that's kind of damaging to like the overall goal of your movement. If you start with the assumption that everybody already agrees with you, you can be as extremist as you want on as many positions as possible. And as long as they see it, they'll eventually come over to your side. Like Bernie spent more money advertising this cycle than like every other candidate besides Bloomberg and maybe Steyer, I'm not sure. And I mean, like, he doesn't really have as much to show for it as you'd imagine he would. If every single American really wanted all of these progressive policies, they just needed to be shown them, you know?
Well, I mean, that discredits the idea that these people have been indoctrinated into a world in which like socialism is right still like yes, as much as you want to point to exit polls, the people view it kindly, right? The people don't like the word socialism. And when you like point out these policies, they exist in a world where they are not conscious of their bias against these policies because the people in play, the people at power, have long told them that these are against their interests.
I reject that characterization. I don't think that you can blame the establishment and media for every single person that disagrees with you.
Not every single person, right? But acting like that doesn't happen. That isn't a very real thing. That people.
I'm sure that it happens to some extent, but
simultaneously vote against their own interests is ridiculous.
Well, people can vote against their own interests, sure, but you can't just run with the assumption that every single thing you have to say is in the interest of everyone else, and when they disagree, they're against their own interests. Like, for instance, if we look at a really popular policy like Medicare for all, for instance, that means like 50 different things. Like, if you ask 10 different American voters what is Medicare for all, you'll get 10 different answers. Some of them will say, oh, that's when the government provides health insurance. Some will say, oh, that's when the government forces you to go to government hospitals. Some will say, oh, that's just when the government takes away all private. Like, there's like 15 different answers for what that even means. I don't think that it's just the socialism boogeyman, although I do agree that probably plays a little bit into it. But if you have an issue with that, you should be pointing the finger at Bernie. Bernie's not a socialist.
No,
agreed. Democratic socialist.
Agreed.
He chose to label himself that way.
His messaging is poor. His messaging is very poor.
And a lot of
I think he originally was actually a socialist, as far as you could be in America.
He might have been, but you know what?
He came into the mainstream, he realized he couldn't be as extreme. But he'd already called himself a democratic socialist from the start.
Yeah, he should have taken Hillary's advice. Remember when Hillary gave that speech? Remember when Hillary gave that speech and said there's a public and a private position? He should have been privately a socialist and publicly a sock dem. That would have been a
like the N-word.
Just let it hang.
Right,
just let it hang.
Public and private. Good version. But anyway, yeah, like there were a ton of issues with Bernie's campaign, and this the problem. Like, going back to the type of rhetoric that we're using, this idea that every voter is secretly a progressive, they just don't know it yet. I think that that's like fed into some of the the way that the Bernie campaign runs.
Agreed.
Like, this rejection of like the establishment, the constant attacking of the media, the refusal to court endorsements from anybody. Like, these are all things that have been a pretty central part of Bernie's campaign that I think have ultimately been pretty damaging.
Can I say?
But whether or not they're damaging to the campaign, do you like if someone legitimately believes that something is in the interests of all people, and when you vote against that interest, you are actually voting against your own interests as a part of like society? Why are they wrong? Right,
I mean, you say it's a messaging thing. Like, everybody is going to say you're voting against your own interests, right? Like, if every Trump voter, if you vote against Trump, is going to say you're voting against your own interests, right? Like, I literally talk to people that make a tenth as much money as me that vote for my tax cuts, that think they're voting in their own interests, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense, obviously. But I mean, like, that type of messaging doesn't get you anywhere. Everybody thinks that they're voting in their own interests, of course, all the time, constantly.
Is that Bernie's messaging though? Isn't that the Bernie bros on Twitter? Isn't that the exact people that, like, instead of pointing out like Bernie's flaws and pointing out like where he has a poor voting record, the media is going after in an effort to discredit him, because these people on Twitter are fucking going after people because they're fucking immature and ignorant people on a social media platform. Not stupid, immature and ignorant.
Well, like, the problem is that like some of the messaging on this cycle of politics has actually gotten so damaging for Bernie that he's actually had to address it now, not only on the debate stage, but in multiple interviews now. Like, that phenomenon online of like the aggressive Bernie fan, which is actually really sad, because I've said multiple times on stream, Bernie's messaging is nothing like this. Bernie never has called Pete a rat fuck or Warren a fucking snake. Like, this is something that has been like pretty unique to Bernie's fandom, and not necessarily to Bernie himself. But I don't know how much. I don't think. Well,
people do the same thing against Bernie. They categorize him as like an old evil socialist. Well, like, what?
Yeah, that's true.
They categorize him as cartoonishly fucking evil and trying to steal their fucking lives and ruin America and like destroy it from the inside. Like, have you not read the
I'm
Twitter
pretty
threads?
In tune with liberal Twitter. I don't see that anywhere. I see a lot of people.
I'm sure
I've never
I've
seen big
never seen
people,
people try.
It's
big
not the
liberal
liberals that
supporters.
do it though.
I'm
No,
sure there
like-
are people that do it, but the problem is the Bernie movement online is so big that those attacks are not only more noticeable because they're more visible, but also that they're incredibly vitriolic. Like attacking Bernie as a socialist that wants to steal everything is pretty bad, but calling Pete a rat fuck that's not actually gay because he doesn't look gay enough on stage, that's like a whole other level of like, holy
Yeah,
And the primary issue, though,
you're
is
right.
that people doing it on Bernie's side, these tend to be leading voices in that community. I don't know any leading
they,
voices
though?
of the people.
Yes.
Yes.
Wait,
This is another-
like who?
this is
Wait,
like-
like who?
Okay, so like
Hassan,
Alinsky, like Hassan, like Sean
Wait,
Penn,
did Hassan call
like,
Chapo
Rat fuck?
Trap House, like a lot of them.
Yep.
do,
These
yeah.
people actually calling Pete a rat fuck.
Stream image like him as a rat or something.
like Bernie literally did an overview with Chapo, and Chapo have gone online like fucking railing against fucking Warren and some pretty
Okay,
borderline
that's fucking disgusting then. Okay,
Sure.
I'm with you
like,
then.
and this is another problem. So, like, if we all remember the anti-SJWs from like years back, usually what they would do is they would find a tweet that has like fucking 2 likes on it and say, "Oh, well, look at how problematic the SJWs are." It's like, okay, come on, dude. Nobody legitimately believes that we should be forcing all children to be transgender. Okay, this is stupid. But when you look at some of the Bernie attacks on the left, you know, like hashtag primary Warren was trending on Twitter. You know, people calling Pete a rat fuck. This is like standard practice. These tweets get tens of thousands sometimes of retweets and likes, and like that level of engagement is pretty scary. I think like it shows like an overall, at least in the online politosphere, like a trend towards kind of like toxic discourse that I haven't usually seen in the past.
Yeah, and scariest to me is the people on the left who I used to have a lot of respect for, who, well, the people that did it I usually didn't have respect for in the first place, but there were a lot of people who just sat there and defended it as diversity of tactics, as though that makes them, you know,
Really?
not complicit in that type of behavior. Absolutely.
Jesus Christ.
There's a ton of leftist voices that I know on who did not at all call out these people on, you know, these awful attacks that they were making against Pete and Warren. Like,
Wait, can I say something?
there's no way to defend that type of shit.
You
I
gotta
have-
realize,
okay.
Pixie, you can't ask for permission. You just gotta fucking go.
Okay, I'll
But
just
yes, you
jump
can go.
in.
Yes.
Start screaming.
I guess I also have mixed feelings about this because on one hand I can agree, like, hey, you know what, like maybe we shouldn't be using like personal attacks over things that people can't control.
Homophobic.
Yeah, like homophobic, absolutely not. But then when it comes to like calling like, I don't know, like Pete a rat or like Warren a snake because of some perceived like slight when it comes to wanting something like for Medicare for all or for wanting decriminalization of marijuana or shit like that, then I kind of have mixed feelings because like all I can think of is that holy shit, if your life might depend on having like cheaper healthcare, right? If you can't continue affording insulin for $375 a month and you honestly believe Bernie's the only one who's willing to fight for that, then holy fuck, of course you're gonna be pissed. Like
But
that's
this is the
way
emotion-
I
more-
agree that
This
it's
is way more
understandable,
than
Pixie.
that.
Hold on. I agree that it's understandable, Pixie, but that doesn't do anything to further our political goals at the end of the day,
Yeah.
right?
Well, but that's
Okay, but
also
then
just not
he's-
true. Like virtually every Democrat on stage, I think, is running on some form of either universal or borderline universal healthcare. Like this idea that that Bernie is the only path towards helping like some people.
No, but he wasn't the only path. But now, like we are left with most like candidates who don't like Biden is not that path. Biden is a path.
Well, I mean,
to
Biden wants
Obamacare,
to-
like, that's his promise.
Sure, but I mean, like we also have to look at what's politically effective as well, right? Like if you're somebody that stand the fuck out of Bernie, but Bernie can't even get endorsements from representatives, let alone signatures on major legislation. Like, was that actually your path towards cheaper insulin? Like, probably
well, I mean,
not.
like you can make an argument, right, with like even Trump, right? He was not a legislator at all. He wasn't like in politics at all, and he's still been able to get legislation somewhat passed. Like
I don't think so, though. Trump has been like
Has
relatively
he?
like Trump has
He
done what he
hasn't done
can.
much.
Like,
but some.
No.
better
Trump
than
has done what
none.
he- Trump has
passed
done what
things
he's-
through executive orders at the very least. Which
Yeah, but
have
Trump has done what has been
vaccination.
put in front of him, right?
Yeah,
he hasn't.
Trump-
really-
Trump has been able to do what he can via executive order. So like appointments he can do, federal judges, Supreme Court judges, like that's stuff that Trump is able to do. But in terms of like major legislation, they had like their tax bill, which was good for them. But other than that, I mean, like he's had to fight constantly for the fucking wall. And then that's kind of it. They weren't even able to repeal the ACA. They only defunded it. Like legislatively, I don't think Trump has really been that successful.
Trump has broad support for the most part across Republicans. And if he's not able to do the wall, not that it's incredibly popular among Republicans, but if he can't do that at a cost of, I don't know, nowhere near Medicare for all, how are we planning on Bernie doing this when no one signed on for it?
I guess the point that I was trying to get across is that just having
Because
the
of
power
its
that the
popularity.
biggest-
Wait, what?
Hold on, North.
Yeah, not only that, but isn't there a net benefit, right? Isn't that Bernie's proposal is that in the long run it's going to cost us less, and the wall's never going to be more affordable or return on investment.
Yeah, I think
for Americans.
that's a weird dichotomy
weird
to make.
comparison. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting, Pxie.
Oh well, no. The thing that I was like trying to get
Damn.
across, kind of, was this whole idea of like just being president and having the power of executive order already. I don't want to say guarantees you, like gives you like a shit ton of leeway when it comes to at least trying to pass some sort of legislation or having some foundation to build on that you might have not otherwise had by not having presidency at all.
Well, but I reject this because like one of the big things that we say constantly is like we don't want to go back to like the path to fascism. Anything, if we should have learned anything under Obama, it's that anything that can be passed via executive order can be rescinded via executive order. This is our huge issue with DACA, right? Obama couldn't get legislation through Congress related to immigration, so he fucking signed DACA via executive order, and Trump came in and he just got rid of it, right? Like we have to work on, and this has always been like my principal criticism of like the Bernie camp. You have to build a coalition of people to get stuff done. That means making friends with the media. It means making friends with representatives and senators. It means like having like a wide, diverse group of people that, because at the end of the day, like you're not going to.
Does it mean selling out? Does it mean selling out to those interests though? Because the entire the entire Bernie camp has long said, right? Like it doesn't end when we get to the polls. It doesn't end even when he gets into office, right? It is a continual effort to be engaged in the political process
but
in
they
order
aren't.
to elect right down the ticket. Wait, what? Why aren't they?
But North, if you don't get into office, you don't get step number 2.
Well, of course.
No.
But
Step number 2 comes first. That's step 1. Like the building a coalition, you have to do that
Well,
before you
sure.
get to the presidency.
course.
And this is something that like the Bernie camp just hasn't done a good job at doing. They've made enemies of everybody in the establishment. Ironically, everybody was shitting on Hillary a month ago for saying that like nobody likes Bernie. But if you go and look at the amount of endorsements and shit he has, if you go and look at his like relationship with people in the media, like with people in the Democratic Party, is kind of true. It doesn't seem like anybody really does like Bernie, and that's a big problem. You have to build a coalition of not only voters but of people in and out of the establishment if you want to actually make meaningful change. Because
I think that's part
unless you run on a populist campaign in order and it has failed, but just because it has failed here doesn't mean it would always fail, right? Like obviously like in this specific instance it has, but acting as if you cannot rely on being like someone who is outside of the establishment and relying on voters who feel disenfranchised by those members of the establishment in the first place, it doesn't mean that you can't run and win on that coalition of just voters.
I think that's part of the reason why Bernie nudged Warren to run in 2016, because Bernie knew that Warren had a lot more friends within the party establishment than Bernie.
Agreed.
Right.
And she would have made a much better, I think she would have beaten in terms of passing the primary candidate than Bernie Sanders.
Well,
Bernie
Warren
Sanders always has the
primary.
opposition.
As much as I don't care for when Warren does it, but I think it is politically savvy. I think that Warren has that support of the establishment behind her because she's willing to toe the party line when it's politically convenient for her. Which you could say that like that sucks, and it stifles our chance of getting progressive legislation through or whatever. But I mean, it's politically smart, right? Like I don't know, if we're gonna get a progressive in office, it's probably gonna have to take kind of that approach.
The issue is you can't do it mid-campaign. Right.
Exactly. Right. You would have to change the culture leading up to that to lead to a more
she switched
accepting.
halfway through, and then her numbers just completely plummeted.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. There's something that's really bothering me about the whole like we need establishment help or like we need establishment to like work with us, and maybe you guys can give me like better arguments against it. But I keep thinking about fucking Donald Trump, who was like hated by everybody.
You're doing the
single
narrative
fucking-
again. You're conflating establishment Democrats with like Trump. Like
Well, no,
Also, like-
no. That's not what I was complaining at all. I was talking
Sounds
about
like it.
established Dems, established Republicans, established media. I said everybody fucking hated Trump. Who was part of any establishment, period.
And
like,
he
you
relied on
cannot think-
populist support. He relied on populist support, right? And instead of like coalitions within the Republican Party in order to win the primary.
Well, so I think a really key difference here, as somebody that used to be a Republican back in my early days, the difference is that Republicans fucking hated the Republican Party. I don't think Democrats fucking hate the Democratic Party. Like, it's pretty hard to find a lot of Republicans that will fondly look back on the years of Bush Bush, you can find a lot of Democrats that look back fondly. I think so. Like the whole Tea Party movement got fucking massive, and that whole split from like the traditional, like I think even I'd have to go back, but I think even Bush himself had to fight so much with the Freedom Caucus in terms of getting stuff done. Or was that under Trump? I don't remember, but like I know that like the Tea Party division in the Republican Party undermined it way harder than the progressives have in the Democratic Party. I think that generally, Democrats have a much more favorable view of the Democratic Party than Republicans had of the Republican Party. So it's a lot harder to come out of left field and be like, "Fuck the whole Democratic Party."
Also, remember that the Republicans voted for Reagan, right? So there was already that precedent to endorse, an outsider, someone who is rich outside the main party elite. I mean, I think that the Republicans already had that type of history, wherein, the Democrats, it's basically all been party elites going back
for the past 40 to 50 years. Yeah.
Do you think we're creating that situation with young Democrats, though, feeling disenfranchised and sort of like the party doesn't represent them?
I think that's what we're seeing with a lot of the Bernie or busters right now. It's a lot of people that are coming into electoral politics, don't really know the process, don't really know how hard it is to get change, and then they're having this knee-jerk reaction, right? And that's what we're seeing online.
Yeah.
They're realizing that electoral politics is a lot harder than just like I don't know, backing one candidate and hoping he wins. I don't know.
Well, most of them don't even know what the filibuster is. I mean, Bernie would have just run into a brick wall trying to pass anything once he got in there.
Well, Bernie says he wanted to get rid of the filibuster, right? That was one of his big positions.
No, he was against getting rid of it.
Wait, I'm almost positive Bernie said he wanted to get rid of the filibuster. He wanted to do the consolidation.
No, Bernie doesn't want to get rid of it.
Bernie and Biden.
It wouldn't make sense for Bernie to want to do that anyways, because he's historically has used it. Like, fucking.
Well, just because you use something doesn't mean you can't be in favor of
You're thinking I thought
he would. I wish he did support it. Would have helped him a lot, because then he could have done what Pxie said and been like, we're ramming this shit through. We don't need the establishment. But when you need a couple Republicans to help out and maybe even get some Democrats on board in the Senate, you're going to run into a brick wall.
Okay, now, so Bernie wanted to pass stuff using budget reconciliation to avoid like filibuster stuff. I guess it's not that he wanted to get rid of it. Yeah, okay.
But you could count out anything else he wanted to do, So I don't know. I think it's what MindWaves was saying. There's a lot of young people and with big eyes coming involved in the process, getting excited, and they don't realize that it's what Destiny described: coalition building. Politics is, you can't do it alone. You can't just walk in there and just push everybody around. Donald Trump's a little different. Donald Trump's a reality TV star. This is a guy who knows how to speak to the public and work over the public. That was his coalition. The American people, he won them over. This guy's on TV for 12 years.
We also, something that we're now learning very hard, Trump had probably the greatest asset that he could have ever had to his campaign, which is that he ran against Hillary Clinton.
We were talking about that earlier, about how the hate for Hillary helped Bernie. Like I was saying, I think the reason why Bernie won Michigan in 2016 was because people fucking hated Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, for sure.
The reason why he lost.
We know that for
they hate the name Clinton as well. Like they're right, like they're Rust Belt. They don't like NAFTA. Like they resent the administration that are taking their gerbs.
Andre, you're going to say
I guess it's a different kind of hate, but I think the hate there is for Biden. I guess hate's the wrong word. Right?
Yeah, it's weird. I feel like Biden was also on board with those type of policies.
If you look at the mobilization of voters under Biden, there's no way you can say the hatred for him is anywhere near the low. I don't think the thing is that Hillary was the victim of like a multi-year intense fucking smear campaign, like headed by the presidency, bolstered a little bit even by the FBI. I mean, like, what was it, like fucking 12 hours of hearing over the Benghazi shit, where Hillary Clinton like supposedly walked in on her own to that fucking embassy with an AK-47 and murdered Americans. Like, holy shit! Like the email shit that we heard about for fucking, I want to say it was over a year that we heard about email shit. Like,
to be fair, I think Hillary is a god awful person, but not for those reasons. Like, those are bullshit reasons, and they're legitimate reasons too.
But the Hunter Biden thing exists, and him being disconnected and mentally not all there is that the narrative is starting to form. Be right, not to the same degree. I really do think it's a different tune, but there's a general dislike, I think, or maybe I'm just projecting my own.
The Hunter Biden stuff is so complicated to understand compared to Hillary deleted all of her emails to hide from the FBI, or or that Hillary literally let soldiers in Benghazi fucking die. Like, trying to understand or piece together what's going on with like Joe Biden's son, I don't think that's going to stick with voters anywhere near as well as Hillary and the Benghazi and email stuff.
It's also rough because Trump has done so much nepotism for his kids. I think he'd be a little bit, that's a little risky road to go down during primaries. Like, didn't Bloomberg say he was going to dump a fuck ton of money into politicizing that as well?
You said like over $1 billion, I believe, towards whoever is the Democratic nominee.
Yeah, I mean, I said before, I mean, based on at least the numbers in Michigan, it looks like, in the state that Hillary lost to Trump, it looks promising that he's going to be able to pull it off.
Especially given the margins that we had it before, right? It does look much more promising. That being said, it is an incumbent president, right? It isn't the same.
What?
I said it's like been like 3 times in the history of the presidency that an incumbent has lost re-election.
Yeah,
so
I'm not sure if it's 3, but incumbents rarely fucking lose. They either don't run or they win. Right?
Can we talk about how fucking amazing it was how Bloomberg's campaign just fucking sucked. Like the most satisfying thing of the whole campaign was just watching Bloomberg crash and burn.
Well, the Bloomberg campaign was actually decent. It's just Bloomberg himself was
but that's what I mean. Watching him go up on that debate stage.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Yeah, this entire machine around him.
Orgasm so hard while watching something on live television. It was just amazing.
You have this entire machine around him with so much money and actually like so much good messaging that comes together into like one culminative,
so hyped,
like accumulating like performance of just everyone on the stage just taking pot shots at Bloomberg like one after the other. So he was a fucking punching bag on stage. It was beautiful.
Elizabeth Warren was so tenacious. I know you love that, Rim. It was so nice to watch. She had venom.
What about me? What about?
Oh, if you were excited to see Bloomberg crumble, you must have enjoyed Warren.
I did. Yeah.
How could you not?
Oh, I miss those days. Now we're stuck with fucking one old man who can barely speak.
Oh, I guess I do want to ask about that.
Another old man who can't change his tune.
Right. I do want to ask about that. I really wish I'd have got my Bloomberg micro influencer check and never came through. But I guess more importantly, so what did you get yours, MindWaves?
No, I wanted that 150, dude. Come on, I could have used that.
I guess I want to know Destiny's take since he's new here. But earlier we talked, and Dan and I'm really important. We're saying that they think that Biden's stands a good chance against Trump. Do you agree or disagree? I don't know your take.
I mean, before Super Tuesday, I would have disagreed, but like looking at the turnout for Biden, it's actually been insane. I assume, I don't know if I still feel this way, but I would have assumed in the past that it's going to be an uphill battle against Trump, no matter who's elected. But holy fuck, the turnout for Biden has been absolutely fucking insane. So it is possible that I've always said it's going to come down to how the economy is doing. Like it seems like before the coronavirus, Americans had a very optimistic view of the economy. Like the outlook was really good. Maybe this changes it, and that'll damage Trump a lot. I guess it's hard to say, but
yeah, I mean, like the Biden campaign is going to be running on how
thank you so much. I appreciate
the Trump
that.
administration completely royally fucked up their handling of of testing for the virus and how they.
Well, it's going to depend on if the corona shit goes away in a month. It'll be out of the news cycle. No one will give a fuck anymore. Really depends, right? So, but if this corona shit is still going on, then yeah, it's possible.
It's not going to go away in a month. There's no fucking.
Yeah, it seems unlikely, right? It could get worse.
Many experts predict that 70% of the country is going to become infected.
Yeah, Turing was saying within 2 weeks we were going to be like Italy with shutdowns for schools and.
I want to see how much of that turnout for Biden is based on like the very recent endorsements from all the other candidates right before those primaries, right?
You really think that's where it all comes from?
I don't know. I have no idea. It could be. It's a huge factor. Obviously, I think we all acknowledge that.
I don't think so.
No, you don't think so?
I don't think it matters who they endorse. I just think that all the other moderates are gone, and now they have to you have to go to Biden.
And I think the moderates are riled up. Like there is this call to normalcy that is like the biggest. It's obviously a bigger call to arms than any progressive messaging, right? That it is the biggest thing that matters to people right now. Like they want someone that can take on Trump. That is like that. There is a very obvious mandate from the primary voters, right? Like I don't think that anyone can really disagree with that.
On that, Biden had a really good last debate. So
where are you putting the bar though for great debate?
No, like like compared to the other candidates, I think he did probably the best. He was on message. He didn't have any like real gaffes, but it's because he wasn't. It was still a bunch of people on stage. Everyone was attacking Bernie. The crowd was very much stacked against Bernie, and it all just sort of went in his favor.
I reject the idea that Biden is just like a fucking like stumbling moron who can't get a thought out. Like, sure, he fucks up, but it's not like he's doing it every other sentence. Like, he can do debates.
Oh, you okay? I think you underestimate. If you look at
watch debates, he can.
No, hold on. No. Over the past 20 years, this is not just like a recent. Joe Biden is known for his gaffes, right? The mainstream media is even aware of this, and they're like, "Oh, cute Joe Biden."
Yeah,
that was the case under Obama too, as well, right? It's not just this primary.
That's not even a bad thing then. And he's just an endearing, kind of
it is a bad thing because he lost.
I thought it was really endearing when he talked about AR-14s. That was pretty so cute.
We did have 8 years. We did have 8 years of Bush.
He tells people to go vote for fucking Trump. That's just so endearing.
Okay, and then we had Bernie who said that the Democratic.
Wait.
That's not true. Context. He wasn't saying that.
Hold on.
Wait. Whoa. No, there's more here. Let me find it. But yeah,
continue. Super out of context.
If you're talking about the video,
there's like 5 different clips. Like
the video that
I think he found very specific already.
There's a very specific video that Kalinsky retweeted that was saying that like if we're going to re-elect Trump or whatever, or the way that we re-elect Trump, but like the full context of that quote.
Twitter flagged it as misleading
because it was so horrendously misleading. Yeah.
No, there's okay. I'm not talking about that clip. There's like 5 separate occasions that are coming to my mind. Just give me a second to find the clips.
I've only seen that one, and it was a mischaracterization. But to say that he's not a gaff machine, Dan, is kind of silly. I think
I don't think
every debate. I mean, he was literally yelling at, what was that, construction workers 2 days ago?
Remember, we have to punch out the problem of domestic violence. I mean, there's so much. I can name 10 off the top of my head where he starts talking
poor kids are just as smart as white kids.
I mean, have you guys watched
I'm not going to lie. I really want to see Joe Biden unironically go fight his constituents. Like, that would be really fun to see.
Wait, have you guys all forgotten how bad Trump is at debating?
You're wrong. No, he isn't.
He is. He's fucking horrible. Go watch the debates. He got fucking destroyed by Hillary.
No. This is the difference between Trump and Biden. Biden, like when someone, like remember during the first debate, someone attacked him, and he was like, "Oh no!" Right?
Wait, I'm sorry. Do you think that
Biden's response in the debates to any kind of antagonism has been to shrivel up and stop talking, because that's the entire strategy of the campaign. Is Biden airtime is good.
Trump will just
go of the Biden
wrong, right? Yeah. Like Biden would
and
never
then Biden will just sit there. He'll put his hands in his lap. He'll go, "This is malarkey," and he'll sit down.
Listen, I love you guys, but I'm on vacation. Fuck this shit. Good luck with your Bernie stuff. Okay, be careful. Okay, bye.
All right.
Yeah, you better believe I'm gonna make a nepotism joke at you. You can't be offended by that. Come on, you gotta have thicker skin than that, buddy.
Oh no! I'm not offended by the nepotism.